Hey, you know what I'm about to say. I'm 15 minutes late. I decided that my new approach to being on time to things is that I will be on time to things. And when other people tell me I'm not on time, what I'm going to tell them is that I'm not late. This meeting was just scheduled too early. All right, I'm going to give my little tiny video, which, as always, I will edit down and post as a trailer, standalone thing on its own, but a little bit of a teaser to see the extended thing here on YouTube. When you're someone in charge of changing the way your organization operates, you're doing a lot of analysis, thinking through new things. You're doing a lot of rhetoric to argue your case with other people, convince them. You got to be wily and clever. You're always trying to do intellectual hustles. It's important, especially if it's not something that you have regularly done with sort of your mind, your intellect, to make sure that you're keeping it sharp. You put it through exercises. The goal is to habituate your ability to analyze things, sum them up, see the different scenarios, find out what goals there are, and really have that kind of plodding, let's go through a cycle of figuring out how to solve this problem, not just do the same thing over and over again. To think like a product person rather than a project person. Your analysis part of your mind has to be exercised and run through the courses like anything else. What I like to do is, I'll give you an example. I like to listen to books or read people's policy position and discussions, but I like to find people who are doing kind of unique analysis. They very systematically walk through looking at something, or whether it's some literature, a play, or some sort of government policy, and they spell out. They don't really use, I guess, claims to what's just and right and what's unjust and things like that. But they walk through, if this is the thing you want, here is what you would do, and here is how you would start to do it, and so you should do it. I really like this guy, Matt Iglesias. He's very good at that kind of systematic way of doing things. Even if I don't really care about his subject matter, it's just mental exercise to read through it. Another example, I've been listening to Susan Sontag's first book. If you've ever balked at like highfalutin criticism and big word academic literature, she's pretty representative of that. But it's fun. Like, you can just listen to it as background noise, like when I'm biking to and from my kid's school, and you can pick out little nuggets here and there. But most of what you can do is your mind is going through the courses of analysis and reasoning and coming up with insights and evolving an idea. So anyhow, figure out what it takes for you, whether it's like listening to fancy books, maybe you like listening to airport books on tape, or I don't know, whatever. But find some things for a little bit, probably each day, to just work out your mind and make sure that it's still sharp enough to go through the gymnastics of figuring out the weirdness, the unknowability of changing your culture around. As always, you can get a couple of free books if you go to tanzutalk.com that I've written, and you can also check out all the other stuff at tanzu.tv. All right, that was my short thing. Not very good. Sounded good in my head when I was doing it on the bike ride home. But really, yeah, if you're into like literature stuff, the Sontag stuff is, I'm probably saying Sontag. I don't know how to pronounce anything. It's good reading. The other quote, so this is the one I was going to start with, but it's the person interviewing her was going over a quote from Roland Barthes, someone who I probably should know from my English literature days, but I forget. And it's that in both cases, they're describing, are you advocating for something, or what's the drive or the purpose of this writing and analysis that you're doing? And the quote from him is, "It was not a question of knowledge, but of alertness, a fastidious transcription of what could be thought about something once it swam into the stream of attention." And that's what I look for in those kind of mental gymnastics, is just, I don't know, meditation through analysis, and also exercise to load a lot more things into there. Beats me. Back to airport business bookery. Speaking of which, let's check in on the old book here. So you can see I'm doing pretty good. I always hope to make these books about 90 pages, so we'll see. Whoa, almost up to 30 pages. So what I have been working on, so I've transcribed a lot of stuff. And down here, this is what I was getting at earlier, is there needs to be more of a philosophy of enterprise culture. A lot of it is, I never know the way to talk about this, to say the phrases correctly. But there's a lot of moralizing and de-jerkifying that goes on, and especially in the IT, the kind of software tech person world nowadays. And there is where a lot of good, I think, corporate philosophizing is going on. I don't think people who do it would call it philosophizing. They would just, my wife always takes this kind of position, they would just call it being normal and being nice. But I think a lot of the basis it's based on morals I agree with and philosophy. And it's interesting to think about how discussions of how corporations should be set up, about how that is a kind of philosophizing of business. In that ballpark, I think I find myself when I'm writing things often getting into a philosophic stance on things. That sounds really highfalutin, but something that like isn't quite like that prescriptive airport business book stuff. And that I found myself writing about that, especially in this part where I just go off on mission statement and values and things like that, which I think I actually talked about here and transcribed in this. But one of the things, where is it? One of the things that I came across, someone was trying to get me to, for their like cloud native WTF thing. Where did I put that? But here's something that I think is worth considering. I think one of the things that marks good, I should say interesting philosophy, is that often people agree with it, but then they also agree they can do nothing about it. Here we go. It's a little footnote. Not to be all David Foster Wallace on you, but there's a matter of like building trust for people. A lot of what you're doing in, I should finally enjoy some of my coffee. A lot of what you're doing when it comes to digital transformation, switching your organization over to using software as the primary mode of operations, the storefront, getting better at software, going from a project to a product mentality with software. You have to build up a lot of trust with your staff and the entire organization. Your board has to trust you. Your bosses have to trust you. Your staff has to trust that you actually want to change. So you're constantly dealing with trust. Now, one of the issues there is that, well, how much trust is, as they say, inherent in the system? And I think a lot of the way that organizations work, at least as far as I can tell, for-profit ones, is the top echelon gets most of the pay. They get most of the praise, a huge amount of the pay. They're the ones who seem most important. And this sort of causes all sorts of cascading problems of trust. Like the section I was writing up today is rewards and motivation in my position. Unless there's money attached to a reward, I think it's next to useless. I thought about putting this in the book, but I remember some older blue-collar worker said that his boss started giving out sort of paper rewards for employee of the quarter. And his boss gave it to him and he just right in his face ripped it up and threw it on the floor and walked away. That's a little extreme, but fair. One of the issues is that if all that money is concentrated at the top, it's like hard to argue that we don't have enough budget. And there's an ongoing discussion, a philosophic discussion that I'm not sure enters the corporate world very much about the kind of just of that, or just the efficacy of that kind of distribution of money. But anyhow, this is another thing with where I was going off on mission statements and values and things like that. And the case that I'm trying to build here is down in that section is like most of those things are vacuous and they don't mean very much. So you should instead, as I'm always wanting to do, turn them around and make them into tools. How can you think of more values as principles, right? Like principles that we follow that allow us to make decisions and guide things. And at some point, I should go over, I guess I could do it now. There's in the UK digital service, they have, someone wrote a book. Some of the people who left there wrote a book coming up, documenting what they had done there. So my suggestion that I was trying to write up in here is that rather than thinking of corporate values as statements about highfalutin humanistic values and things like that, that instead it's good to think about them as principles. Principles being a tool that you can use. If you're trying to build up trust with your staff, it can be difficult when you have this interesting environment. I need to go look this up, but this was an interesting thing, speaking of corporate philosophy, to noodle on. So we put a lot of trust in, they call it the Hippo. Instead of having autonomous product teams, setting them up to make their own decisions, it's the default behavior that the highest paid person in the room wins the argument, the Hippo. And it turns out that the highest paid person in the room is rarely, especially in a product team, the one who's best suited to make the best decision. You want to push that decision as close to the people implementing the thing, the development team, the product team as possible. You'll remember in the kitchen measuring mayonnaise example where the Hippo, so to speak, wanted to digitize the recipe books in the industrial kitchen onto iPads, but is the opposite of a Hippo a Lippo? Then the Lippos, they instead went and investigated and found something else, and so they had the autonomy to do that. I need to go look at this study, but it turns out that way up in the management stacks, things are quite problematic over the course of a long time, because when you looked at the kind of famous CEOs in this study, the top 25 American CEOs, a disturbingly large amount of them were eventually, as it says, bailed out, booted, or busted. So all of that high pay didn't necessarily result in stupendous performance. Now, another way of looking at that, aside from the busted part, which is to say they're doing something wrong, another way of looking at that is a discussion we always have here, which is we're always talking about the need to learn and take risks and fail towards success. And obviously, we don't often mean that. If this amount of people were getting booted out and they were taking risks, we can exclude the ones that are bad ideas of risks. But if you're not rewarding your executives, I'm totally turning this frown upside down, but if you're not rewarding your highest level executives, if they get booted out for trying out new things that fail, then you are signaling to all of the staff that they will also be punished if they try new things out, and they should just not try. This has been your Thursday edition of Tanzu Talk. If you want to get the archives for this show, check out all the other shows that we have. You can go to tanzu.tv and find them all there. We'll see everyone Tuesday around 10:30 p.m. Central Europe time, Amsterdam time. And remember, if I'm late, it's just because I scheduled that meeting way too early. Bye-bye.